In the landscape of American criminal justice, some cases stand out not just for their severity, but for the complex questions they force us to confront. This is one of those cases. It involves a young woman who, at just 18 years old, committed a heinous crime that would lead to a rare sentence. Today, she is Christa Pike, the youngest woman sentenced to death in the United States in the modern era, and the only woman on Tennessee's death row. Her story digs deeply into a traumatic past, a chilling crime, and a decades-long legal battle that challenges our very understanding of culpability, justice, and the line between adolescence and adulthood. The story begins on January 12th at a Job Corps center in Knoxville, Tennessee. The event that would define this case was the tragic death of a 19-year-old student named Colleen Slemmer. The motive, as presented by the prosecution, was born from intense jealousy. Christa Pike believed that Colleen was trying to win the affection of her boyfriend, Tadaryl Shipp, an idea that Colleen's own friends insisted was completely untrue. Pike, along with Shipp and another 18-year-old student, Shadolla Peterson, allegedly devised a plan. They lured Colleen to an isolated, abandoned steam plant near the University of Tennessee campus under the guise of a peace offering, a chance to share some marijuana and smooth things over. But what happened at that secluded location was a terrifying ordeal. For an estimated 30 to 40 minutes, Colleen was taunted and subjected to a prolonged attack by Pike and Shipp, while Peterson stood as a lookout. Using a box cutter and a small cleaver, the assailants inflicted numerous injuries. In a deeply disturbing detail, a pentagram was reportedly etched onto her chest. The final, fatal injury was delivered when Pike used a heavy piece of asphalt to strike Colleen's head, and in a terrifying act that would become a key piece of evidence, Pike took a fragment of the victim's skull as a so-called trophy. In the hours and days that followed, Pike's behavior was not one of remorse or concealment. She openly displayed the skull fragment around the Job Corps center. Witnesses reported her recounting the attack in graphic detail to a friend, while another student claimed Pike pointed to her shoes and said, "That isn't mud on my shoes." The brazen behavior led to immediate arrests. Within 36 hours, Pike, Shipp, and Peterson were in custody. A logbook at the center showed the four of them leaving together, but only 3 returning. The skull fragment was discovered in Pike's jacket pocket. Pike initially gave a 46-page confession to police, claiming they only intended to scare Colleen and that things had gotten out of control.
I don't even think I was just like there because she made me so mad. And I just couldn't with her. And she was just going, please don't. I said, shut up, I don't want to talk to you, I don't want you to talk to me. I said, I just want to find somebody to get out of this. I said, it's gone too far, and I need to do what I've done so far.
She even told investigators something truly chilling about why she told Colleen to be quiet during the attack.
You know, it's harder to hurt somebody when they're talking to you and you have to see another person. Right. And I told her to shut up. And she was still breathing. I said, Colleen, do you know who's doing this to you? And she was just going, just talking like that. But I don't know what she was saying.
This initial picture, the planning, the nature of the attack, and the behavior afterward, created a dark narrative from the very beginning, one that would loom large over all future legal proceedings. To understand the person behind this act, we must look at the path that led her there. Born prematurely on March 10, 1976, she was raised in a tumultuous environment of parental neglect. Relatives recalled disturbing scenes from her childhood, including her mother allegedly prioritizing her social life over her toddler daughter, who was suffering from severe seizures. Her paternal grandmother was her primary stable figure. but that stability vanished when her grandmother passed away. At age 8, she attempted to take her own life and received some psychiatric care. She tried again at 12 after her grandmother's passing, but this time she received very little support. Her teenage years were a cycle of instability and violence, where she was both a victim and a perpetrator. The lines were blurred in a chaotic home life, which included accusations of her being a pathological liar and documented incidents of her own violent behavior. At 18, after dropping out of high school, she landed in the Job Corps program, hoping to become a nursing assistant. It was there she met Tadaryl Shipp. Together, they developed an interest in the occult. According to testimony, they came to believe they should offer a human sacrifice. During her trial, expert testimony provided a nuanced picture of Pike's mental state. Dr. Jonathan Pincus, a neurologist, argued that a combination of brain damage, possibly from prenatal alcohol exposure, a history of severe abuse, and mental illness were all present in her case. He testified that her frontal lobes, which govern our sense of right and wrong, were not put together properly. A forensic psychiatrist, Dr. William Kenner, testified that Pike suffered from undiagnosed bipolar disorder, describing her as a car with the cruise control constantly set at over 95 miles per hour. But these mitigating factors were weighed against the aggravating factors of the crime itself. Shadolla Peterson, the lookout, testified for the prosecution and received probation. Tadaryl Shipp, who was 17 at the time of the crime, was tried as an adult. He was found guilty, but the jury could not agree on a sentence of life without parole. A judge sentenced him to life in prison, and he becomes eligible for parole in January 2026. Christa Pike's trial was different. In March 1996, a jury found her guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy. She was sentenced to death by electrocution.
It is therefore ordered that you shall be put to death by electrocution in the mode prescribed by law, and that you shall be transferred to the custody of the warden at the Tennessee Prison for Women. And further, on the 12th day of January 1997, your body shall be subjected to shock by sufficient current of electricity. May God have mercy upon you. Mr. Bates, Mrs. Pike, and Tadaryl.
Can I please have a mom before I go?
At just 20 years old, she was convicted for a crime she committed at 18, making her the youngest woman on death row in the country. This disparity, Shipp, just a year younger, receiving a parole-eligible sentence, while Pike received a death sentence, would become a central pillar of her future appeals. Her 3 decades on death row have been turbulent, marked by a conviction for the attempted murder of another inmate and a foiled escape plot in 2012. In recent years, Pike's legal challenges have focused on an evolving area of science: adolescent brain development. The scientific consensus is now clear that the brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex responsible for impulse control and rational decision-making, is not fully mature until the mid-20s. Her lawyers argue that there is no meaningful scientific basis to treat an 18-year-old's culpability so drastically differently from a 17-year-old's. They contend that Pike's brain was, quote, severely compromised by trauma, neglect, and untreated mental illness, making her exceptionally vulnerable to poor judgment. This argument gained new traction after a 2022 Tennessee Supreme Court ruling found automatic life without parole sentences for juveniles under 18 to be unconstitutional. Pike's lawyers tried to extend this logic to her case, but in 2023, a judge denied their motion, stating that Pike was legally an adult. The case stands as a stark statistical outlier in Tennessee. She is the only woman on the state's death row. Furthermore, of the 8 18-year-olds sentenced to death in Tennessee's modern era, all the others, all men whose convictions came before hers, have since had their death sentences vacated. It has been over 3 decades since a Tennessee court handed down a death sentence to an 18-year-old that is stuck. The case of Christa Pike leaves us at a difficult crossroads, caught between the unchangeable horror of her actions and the undeniable complexities of her life and mind. the tragic and senseless death of Colleen Slemmer, a young woman whose life ended unexpectedly in the most horrible way possible, is still at the center of this story. A verdict and a sentence were handed down by the legal system. However, the questions remain. Is Christa Pike the epitome of evil and deserving of the worst punishment? Or is she the result of a traumatic upbringing and brain damage, and her sentence represents a legal system that is still lagging behind science? Her case pushes us to face difficult issues regarding mercy, justice, and human change. What are your thoughts on this complex case? Please share them respectfully in the comments below. And before we go, if you found this video interesting, please consider subscribing to my channel Truly Chilling. A like on this video also really helps us reach more people. Thank you so much for your time and for your support. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.